The New York Giants are in desperate search for a win in these final weeks of the 2024 season. Can they get it this weekend against the New Orleans Saints at home? We'll have a breakdown of that and much more on today's Locked On Giants podcast coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. So do check that out. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, to my everydayers, to my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. You are appreciated. And today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, on today's Locked On Giants podcast, the New York Giants are in the midst of a very bad losing streak. They've lost 7 in a row now. They desperately want to win. They desperately need a win, not so much for, any standings or anything like that, but more so for the morale in the locker room to maybe balance some of the sadness, if you will, that's settling into the locker room and just kind of make everybody kind of feel good, get everybody back on track as they play out the rest of this season. So we'll talk about that. And if they have a good chance against the New Orleans team, which has had its own problems. They're doing a little bit better in terms of the record, playing in that NFC South, but the Saints have had their own issues. And, is the Saints game, is that the last chance for the Giants to maybe win this season? So we'll talk about that. And then in segment 2, 2 Giant players who potentially will have a big day on Sunday against the Saints. I'll tell you who they are and why I think they will be key players in the Giants' plan to beat the Saints. And then we'll wrap things up with a look at how the Giants can keep stars in New York. Now, this week, or on Monday, I should say, the question was put to a lot of the players that spoke on the video calls about how former teammates have left the building and they're thriving with other teams. And the Giants, they just can't keep bleeding stars. They can't keep, letting guys walk out the door. They can't keep trading guys away. They've just done a really bad job with building the continuity. So we'll talk a little bit about that to close out the show today. So again, welcome on in. Let's get started. All right, let's talk about the last chance to dance, as I call it. Can the Giants get a win against the Saints? And more importantly, is this their last chance to get a win against in 2024? Now, the remaining games, before I go any further, you have the Saints, Baltimore, who will also be at home for the Giants. Then they are on the road against Atlanta. Then I believe they're at home against the Colts. And then they are on the road against the Eagles to close out the season. Baltimore, Atlanta, the Colts, and the Eagles. I don't think I see a win in any of those 4 games. I mean, now some of you might say, well, what about the Eagles? Because by then, if they have the playoffs wrapped up, maybe they will sit some of their starters or all their starters. Folks, at this point, I got to wonder if the Giants starters are better than the Eagles backups. I don't know that I would go there. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that's an opportunity to win. Baltimore, I would be shocked if the Giants upset the Ravens. I think they did last year or a couple of years ago. I don't think they do it again, to be honest with you. I just don't see, Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, I don't think they pull it off. Atlanta, that can go either way, but that's on the road against the Falcons. I think you get the advantage there to Atlanta. The Colts, maybe, but that's a toss-up. That one, I just don't think that one's a slam dunk. Now, the Saints, do I think that's a slam dunk? Well, with this Giants team, you can't say any game is a slam dunk. But I do think that out of the remaining opponents the Giants have on their schedule, the Saints represent the best chance for the Giants to get a win. Now, I know right away what some of you are thinking. We don't want the Giants to win. They've got to tank. They've got to have they've got to get into the first pick overall in the draft because they've got to get a quarterback. Folks, I've told you this time and time again. The Giants are not thinking that way. They are not thinking about tanking. Brian Dable right now is coaching for his job. So for him to, order a tanking, that's just not going to happen. All right. They are preparing to win every game. Now, are they overmatched in a lot of these remaining games? Yes, but they're still preparing. They're still going through the practices, the game planning, all that stuff. So, no, nobody in the Giants organization is tanking, despite what some of you in the fan base want to see happen. So, let's look at the Saints. The Saints are 1-4 on the road, all right, which is not the best record. Their last win, by the way, on the road, or their only win, came way back in week 2 against Dallas. That was a 44-19 game, by the way. The Saints are 3-5 against the NFC teams. Okay. They are running hot and cold. Their defense, which I'll kind of get into in the next segment, has not been very good. Their offense, which can be explosive, has not been consistent. So you look at this matchup between the Giants and the Saints, and if there's one matchup that I think the Saints potentially can do damage with as far as, facing the Giants, and that is the run game with Alvin Kamara. All right. The Giants, as we all know, Dexter Lawrence is now on IR. Basically, he's done for the season. Where is the Giants' run game, or run defense, I should say? Where's that going to come from? I don't know. Is Raheem Nunez Roches, who had a stinger, is he going to be ready to go? Is DJ Davidson, who re-injured his shoulder, is he going to be ready to go? That's some concern we have here with the defensive front. That defensive front is banged up, and now they just added the defensive tackle from the Rams practice squad, Corey Druden, I think it is. He's got to learn the defense ice cold. You've got Elijah Chapman, who hasn't been horrible, but you're talking a significant drop off from what they had. The Giants' run defense is in big, big trouble. So as I see it, if they can potentially limit Alvin Kamara in the run game, I think they give themselves a fighting chance. But that being said, the Saints offense can be explosive. We have seen them score upwards of 30 plus points in a game. So, the pass rush obviously has to get home. They've got to stop the run, which they haven't been able to do all season long, if you think about it. So it's not going to be easy for the Giants, I think, to beat the Saints. I think, at best you want to keep it competitive. But that all being said, and I'll get into this in the next segment about, how the Giants can beat the Saints, I think this team probably is going to match up as best as possible against the Giants. Whereas, the opponents down the road, I'm not so sure that I like some of the matchups that we will see. All right, coming up next, there are 2 Giant players on offense that can potentially make a difference for the team seeking its first win at home in 2024. And I will tell you who those guys are right after this. Hey, Giant fans, with big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price that you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. And now you can get 3 months of premium wireless service for only $15 a month. Just go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonNFL. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedonNFL. $45 upfront payment required, which is the equivalent of $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 GB on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Hey, Giant fans, Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. Prize Picks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Get your earnings in as little as 15 minutes. And with Prize Picks, they now offer Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. Download the app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I am your host, Patricia Traina, and coming up tomorrow on the Locked On Giants podcast, I'm smiling because I absolutely am so thrilled to be doing a crossover Thursday with the one and only Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints. I absolutely adore Ross. And for those of you who have never seen one of his shows, you are in for a treat. The man brings it. He's got a smile that can light up Manhattan. And I just can't wait to see him this weekend. He's just such a dear friend, a tremendous human being. And I'm just so excited to do Crossover Thursday with Ross this weekend. So anyway, let's get into, speaking of the Giants and Saints, let's talk about 2 players on the New York Giants offense that I think, based on how the trends have gone and how their performance has been, these are 2 players that I'm really looking at who could potentially propel the Giants to that elusive first win at home this season. Okay, the first is running back Tyrone Tracy Jr. Now, the Saints' run defense, for what it's worth, I always talk about how bad the Giants' run defense has been. The Saints' run defense is maybe at one place higher than the Giants' run defense. All right, it's been bad this year. All right, so let's take a look at some of the stats of the Saints' run defense. They are allowing opponents an average of 136 rushing yards per game, which is 26, and they are tied with the Giants for allowing the most rushing yards per carry. That's 5.05 yards per carry. They have allowed 39 big play runs of 10 plus yards. That's 15th in the NFL. And they have the 3rd worst stuff rate at 12.4%, which means they're not stopping guys at or behind the line of scrimmage. They're also allowing 2.18 yards before contact, which is the worst in the NFL, 2.92 yards after contact. The Saints run a stack box approximately 23.2% of the time, which is the 12th highest rate in the NFL. So what does all this mean? Well, Tyrone Tracy, he's been running really well. And, the strength of the Giants' offensive line, I think right now, has been their run blocking. So, if they can get another decent performance with the run game, with the run blocking, then that will help the Giants with setting up second and short, third and short, manageable situations, which will then open up the offense a little bit more for them to do some other stuff, as opposed to being, predictable where, oh, we've got to pass now because, it's second and forever. Now, of course, I say all this. The key for the Giants is they can't shoot themselves in the foot. So no penalties, especially holding. I have not yet looked at who the officiating crew is for the Giants, but I will do that for New York Giants on SI. I'll take a look and do a scouting report on that. But certainly no holding, no penalties, no false starts. There should be none of that. Now, of course, I say that, and the Giants, they've done that just about every week. They have shot themselves in the foot and have played sloppy. I would like to think, having had a little extra time in between games, that maybe the coaching staff will not only come up with ways to exploit the weaknesses on the Saints defense, but also that maybe they have ways to clean up some of these issues. Because I do think, if the Giants are going to win this game, they're going to have to keep up with the Saints. The Saints offense can be very explosive. Like I said, they can put 30 up on you in a heartbeat. Um, so the Giants are going to have to match them offense to offense. And the way to do it is to start with a run. Now, the other player that I think can potentially have a big game is Malik Neighbors. Now, Malik Neighbors last week against Dallas, I believe he had 13 targets, caught 8 balls. Um, he hasn't had a receiving touchdown since before his concussion. I think this weekend, that streak comes to an end. All right, so let's take a look at the Saints' pass defense, including their pass rush, and why I think the Giants could potentially be set up for success here. And by the way, I'll talk about who I think the Giants quarterback is going to be in just a second, but let me just give you some numbers here. So the Saints have allowed quarterbacks an average of almost 3 seconds to throw the ball, which means the average time to throw is actually 2.98 seconds. That's a lot of time, right? Because that will allow, obviously, the quarterback to sit in the pocket, allow some of these receivers to get deep, and hopefully, the quarterback is able to connect with some of these guys on the deep ball. That 2.98 time to throw, second highest in the NFL right now. They have a quarterback pressure rate of 30%, which is the fourth lowest rate in the NFL. They have allowed 43 pass plays of 20 or more yards, the fourth most in the NFL. And they are tied for first on big pass plays of 40 plus yards allowed. Folks, the Saints' pass defense has not been very good. Now, the question becomes, okay, great. So Malik Neighbors, he could potentially have a good game. Who's going to be the quarterback throwing to him? Now, as I record this, it is Tuesday night. The Giants have not announced who it's going to be. I think, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be Drew Lock. I think Drew Lock is going to get the nod over Tommy DeVito. And it has nothing to do with whether Tommy is healthy or not. I just think against the Cowboys, Drew Lock was a little bit better. All right. You take away the turnovers, and one of the turnovers, quite honestly, came on a tip ball. So, tip balls, stuff happens. But I think Drew Lock, did a better job at fitting the ball into tight windows, made better decisions. Didn't always make the right decisions, but they were better. And I just felt, between all that and him running the ball, that he played a solid game, all things considered. Wasn't a perfect game. It's not the type of game that makes me sit up and say Drew Lock should be the bridge quarterback moving forward or the number one quarterback, of the future. No, but he showed enough to where I think, regardless if Tommy DeVito was healthy, Drew Lock will be the starter. That is my guess based on my analysis. Now, by the time some of you watch this podcast, the decision will be known. I will have a breakdown of that, by the way. I'll probably do a quick video at the end of the day on Wednesday on the decision. So that's kind of what I'm looking at as far as keys to the game with the Giants, the two players that I think potentially are going to have the biggest performance against the Saints defense, which has just absolutely struggled this year. So it's just a matter of now, how does Brian Dable, as the chief play caller, how does he map this out? Does he lean heavily on the pass? Does he mix it up with the run game? Because there have been times when I thought, oh, okay, they're facing a poor run defense. They're going to exploit it with the run, and they come out and they pass and they barely use the run. So we'll see how the Giants play it. But those are two players that I think can kind of put the final nail in the coffin of the Saints if they can get their game going and keep the Giants competitive in what could potentially be a score fest in this game coming up on Sunday. All right, coming up next, the Giants have let a lot of stars out of the building over the last few years. So, what can they do moving forward to keep some of these guys from leaving the franchise and going on to have better seasons, better careers elsewhere? We'll talk about it right after this. Hey, Giant fans, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The Giants are currently a 4.5 point underdog against the Saints, with the over under set at 40.5. But will the offense that last week scored 20 points be able to pull off the upset and give the Giants their first home win this season? If you think so, you've got to go and hit FanDuel up, because that's just some of the exciting action you'll be able to get involved with. What are you waiting for? Visit fanduel.com and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's fanduel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And this Sunday, the Giants host the New Orleans Saints. The Giants looking for their first home win of 2024. So hard to believe that they haven't won a game this season. They are also looking to snap a 7-game losing streak. And it feels like it's been a 100-game losing streak. It's just been that kind of season. But anyway, in this segment, I want to talk about keeping stars in New York. Now, you go back and you look at some of the games that have been played this season around the league. For example, the Seahawks played the Jets last Sunday, and Leonard Williams, Julian Love had huge games. 2 ex-Giants, by the way. They had huge games that helped the Seahawks to win. You look at what Saquon Barkley is doing with the Eagles and how he's like literally on his way to a potential MVP season. You look at what Xavier McKinney is doing out in Green Bay, who's also maybe looking at a potential, defensive player of the year type of season. And you say to yourself, gee, what if the Giants had been able to retain all this talent? How good would they actually be? And, I've never really been one to say woulda, coulda, shoulda, didn't. I don't really do that, because I say what's done is done. But here's what I will say, and that is I feel the Giants have not done a good job with evaluating their guys and retaining their talent. All right. So I go back and let's take Leonard Williams, for example. Now, at the time when they traded Leonard Williams, he was, I think, 29 years old, had a lot of mileage on his tires, was in the final year of the contract, and they felt, why would we invest another contract in this guy? So they traded him. And guess what? Leonard Williams has found new life in Seattle. Not bad for a 30 plus guy, a 30-year-old plus guy, right? Julian Love. They tried to get Julian Love back. Didn't work out. I question just how aggressive they were in trying to re-sign Julian Love, who I know wanted to come back, and the deal just wasn't there. Saquon Barkley, we all know what happened there. The Giants, after trying to get him signed in 2022, come 2023, they put him on, he played basically on the franchise tag, and that was it. And they, this past off season, they didn't even make him an offer because they didn't know the value. And Xavier McKinney, well, they just weren't going to pay him $17 million a year. But here's the thing with the Giants, and here's a developing pattern when it has come to these guys walking out the door. The Giants, to me, they fall short in evaluating what they've got and putting a value on what they've got. All right. I go back to that study that they did on running backs and how, running backs decline after, once they hit 27. That's that analytics. And look, I like analytics for certain things, but when it comes to people and assessing a one size fits all to a person's skills, that's where you got to stop. All right. So, you know, analytics that say, oh, running backs, they have short shelf lives and they decline after 27. It depends on the running back. All right. Now, I get it. You look at Saquon's injury history and you say, well, the odds of him not, declining are good. But then again, also say to yourself, okay, was our offensive line, was our run blocking helping the situation? And I just question how much that all was taken into consideration because, look, I said, and I believe this, all right, this is just my opinion here. After the failed negotiations with Saquon, in which it resulted in him having to play last year on the franchise tag, I just got the sense at that point that both sides were done with each other, that they were going to play out 2023, and that was it, that they were done with each other. I got the same sense with McKinney. I knew in 2023, at the start of that season, that the chances of him coming back were slim to none. Again, because of the value that McKinney thought he was worth versus what the Giants thought he was worth. With Leonard Williams, I mentioned he was on the final year of a contract. The Giants, wanting to get something for him. But look, here's the thing, folks. Let's also look at two players this year that the Giants are probably not going to have on the roster next year. And that would be Darius Slayton, the receiver, and Azeez Ojulari, the outside linebacker. Joe Schoen, in not trading one or both of those guys, if he had the opportunity to do so, and I think he did have the opportunity to move Ojulari, those guys are going to walk out the door. And maybe the Giants get a comp pick the following year. Maybe they don't. And as I said to you on a show earlier this week, wouldn't it have been better if you're trying to rebuild a team that right now only has 2 wins? Wouldn't it have been better to get something to be assured that you're going to have a draft pick to use as opposed to sitting there and hoping that you get a draft pick, a couple of years down the line? I don't understand the thinking there. It's a case of beggars can't be choosy at that point because it's not as though the Giants are overflowing with talent to where they can, afford to, be fussy. You know what I mean? So that being said, I just feel like, the Giants missed out on a golden opportunity there to move those guys. But, that being said, let me stick, keeping the stars in place. I get it that, every year there's going to be turnover on the roster and that you can't keep everyone. I get that. But look at, you kind of have to balance it out a little bit. All right. And by that, I mean, can we say that the Giants replaced Xavier McKinney? People will say, well, yeah, they got Tyler Newman. Okay. That's one half the equation. But Jason Pinnock has pretty much been their free safety. Is he better than McKinney? I don't think so. How many interceptions does he have? How many pass breakups? Not McKinney's numbers. At running back with Saquon, okay, Tyrone Tracy has looked good, but is he, the type of runner right now that Saquon Barkley is? Not quite. Got to clean up those ball security issues, but who knows? Maybe down the line, Tyrone Tracy will be just as good, if not better, than Saquon. But the jury's still out there. Leonard Williams, I mean, look at the run defense. Have they ever replaced Leonard Williams' production there? And now, you think the Giants' run defense has been bad. Now that they don't have Dexter Lawrence the rest of the year, I shudder to think what, guys like Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry are going to do to this run defense. I shudder at that. So bottom line, if the Giants want to keep these guys, they really got to do a better job of valuing them. Throw out the darn analytics because that's nothing, and I don't know all that goes into whether, how they decide whether they're going to bring a guy back, whether they're not going to bring a guy back, whether they're going to make an offer, whether they're not going to make an offer. But you gotta, to me, letting some of this talent out when they're just reaching their peak, especially when you are trying to rebuild a team that has not been good for 2 years, it just makes no sense. And it's those types of decisions that cost GMs their job. Now, I've said before that I think Joe Shane is safe. I don't think he's going to be fired after this year, despite what some of you think or want. But I also don't know that I can sit here and say that Joe Shane is going to be the long-term answer, because let me tell you something. If this team wets the bed again next year, he doesn't survive. Not in the least, because at that point, you will have had 4 years to build up this team the right way. And just right now, like I said, the biggest glitch in Joe Shane's game, if you will, has been valuing players, or misvaluing players, I should say. And it's really, really costing the Giants big time. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget, tomorrow, crossover Thursday with Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints. Can't wait for that show. And I can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Have a good one.